Welcome to the Old Lumens channel again. I want to discuss doing a tail cap switch mod on a Maglite. I've done a couple of them. I think I've got it to where I've pretty much figured it out now. And I want to just go over the details now. I'll tell you right now that if you don't have some kind of a rotary tool, a Dremel tool, you're not really going to be able to do this, because you got to be able to use a Dremel tool to open up a nice hole. You can do this with a file in the tail cap. I've done it, but hogging out a piece of plastic is very hard to do without a Dremel tool of some kind, a rotary tool, or at least maybe a drill with a rotary bit. I use a small Dremel rotary bit, and it makes it so it's possible to do. Anyhow, I have a tail cap off this green 1D Maglite I'm doing, and I've drilled a starter hole in the center. Okay, I'm going to use a button that sticks up through the tail cap, and I'm going to use a switch that sits inside a holder. So if I have all my components out here, I'll sort of lay everything out here. This is the tail cap itself. This is a Judco 3 amp push button switch. Okay. This is a piece of 1-inch diameter plastic rod. The spring for a C Maglite. D Maglite just too big, so C Maglite's what I use. Piece of copper plate. This is about 24 thousandths thick, and 4 copper rounds, or 4 rounds. They're not copper. I got 2 brass and 2 steel. They're called nickel silver, but they really don't have any silver in them. So I've marked the tail cap with a nickel silver button, and that's what the black mark is. I'm going to be cutting to the inside diameter, and as I get close, I'll try to make sure that I get as close as I can to a perfect fit without it sticking and without it being too much around the outer edge. The switch is held in with a piece of 1-inch plastic. Now, the depth of this is 16 millimeters. The thickness. By the time I get done cutting with it, it's closer to 15 millimeters. The reason it has to be that thick is because the switch itself, the switch that's going to be buried, is just about 12 millimeters, and I have to cut out that plastic and put the switch inside. And when I'm done, I'm just about flush with where the threaded part of the switch is. Okay, so just the button is sticking out over top. All right, that goes up inside the tail cap, fits up inside the tail cap. Okay, and then there's going to be a series of these metal discs. Now these are all 18 gauge pre-cut, pre-stamped metal discs. Okay, and they're going to set pretty much like I've shown here. Okay, the smaller disc, of course, is going to stick out through the tail cap. The bigger disc is a backing plate on the inside of the tail cap that keeps the whole thing from coming all the way out and falling out of the tail cap. So it's a stopper. Okay, that's the one that'll actually contact the switch. Okay, the reason I have 3 of these discs is because I have to get to a thickness of 3 millimeters. The push button on the Judco switch is 3 millimeters tall, or it has 3 millimeters of travel. It's a hair over 3 millimeters tall, but it has 3 millimeters of travel. Well, I have to use the push button for 3 millimeters of travel. The problem is the thickness in the tail cap is only 1.5 millimeters. Okay, So I can't just use like 1 or 2 of these, because then when I push down the full 3 millimeters of travel, I'm going to go too deep, and I could cock sideways and get caught on the edge of that tail cap and not come back out again. So I need to have a full 3 millimeters of travel, so that when this goes down in, it still remains partially inside that tail cap to guide itself instead of going all the way through. The bad part about that is it's going to stick up a bit. It's not going to be, you're not going to tail stand this thing. But it's about the only thing I've come up with in doing this. I've tried flush before, and flush doesn't work too well, because then it's really hard to get to the button. And this is not a huge button. I mean, this is only like a 5/8, but so big fingers might have a problem with it. Anyhow, the other side of the plastic bushing will have the spring, and the spring will be soldered to a copper round. I'm going to cut that until I get a round, and it'll be soldered to that, and then that will be attached to the bottom of this plastic housing. I'll go right through, not with a screw, probably just a simple pop rivet, okay, that will go right through, and the pop rivet will stick up inside. It'll be flush on the inside here because the switch has got to sit over top of it, okay. And that holds the spring on. Then one wire will go to the spring. The other wire will go to the inside of the tail cap itself, so that there's a connection there. Now, the way when I get to it, I'll show you. But I pin this tail cap, or this plastic housing. When I get the plastic bushing in there, I'm going to drill 2 holes, and I'm going to use brass rods right straight through underneath where the O-ring goes, so it's hidden by the O-ring. And one of them will also have the wire attached to it, so I have a ground, so that when the push button activates, it completes ground through the whole light. I'm going to continue on with what I'm doing here, and when I get a little closer, I'll show you some more. Okay, well, we're back now, and I've gotten the hole bored out for the button. And one thing I'll tell you is that you probably can't see it too well with the camera, but it's not perfect. Unfortunately, I'm sure many of you, or some of you, are like me, and that is a perfectionist. It's a losing battle. It's trying to get perfection, of course, is nothing but frustration and fantasy. You know, it's not reality. So I try to learn to take well enough, you know, good enough, and let it be. This is pretty close, but you can see some gap in there. And another thing about this switch, it's not waterproof. I have not found a way to O-ring it to make it waterproof yet, at least not with hand tools. So it's not waterproof. But anyhow, I have to drill side holes in this plastic bushing. And something I've learned, hang on just a second. Had to shut the door down. The damn neighbors are loud as hell. Them old people, you know, you'd think that they'd be quiet, you know, when they get to their 60s. But no, they still run their damn mouths, you know. Anyways, one of the problems with this is if you just put the large button that's going to be on the switch and just set it up in there where it's going to be, and put the switch in, put it all together, and then drill. What happens is, you know, you're going to have, there's going to be a little slop here and there, and inevitably you get to where your switch doesn't release again. Okay, so you got to leave a little play. And what I've come up with is I just take 2 layers of masking tape and put them on top of the button, then put the whole thing in there, and then just take it into the vise, drill my 2 holes, and then when I take it apart, you know, take the masking tape off the button, I have enough, just just a couple thousandths leeway so that the button works the way it should, the switch works the way it should, and there's enough play that it can release. Believe me, I've I've done this a couple times, and you got to have something to space out just a hair to get a little bit of release in there, but yet still make it fairly tight overall. And so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drill for those pins in the housing. Okay, progress report. I have the holes drilled in the, might be able to see it there. I have the holes drilled in the cap. I have one on each side for pins. I've also drilled a third one, a small one, and that's going to be, I decided what I'll do is I'll run the ground wire straight through that hole, bring it out, spread it out, and then solder it so it stays in place, and the O-ring keeps it in place too. Got the holes drilled through the plastic bushing. I have the spring in place and the mod with the copper braid. That's soldered to the copper plate. There's a wire that comes from the switch up to the base of that. That is held in place with a pop rivet from the back side. So pretty much I'm ready to fill this up a little bit with epoxy to hold the switch in place. Then I can assemble, and that'll be the next steps. Now let's try this again, final installment. All right, basically it's put together. You know, it's all ready to go. I got the two brass pins through the sides, everything hooked up and put together, and right there is a, I don't know if you can see it or not, there's a spot there where there's solder. I pulled the wire right through the cap, side of the tail cap, and soldered it, and then throw an O-ring on it, and pretty much you don't see hardly anything. You can see the brass pins still, but it goes together, and I've already checked to make sure I got continuity on it, and that's it. That's how to, one way to put a tail cap switch in a Maglite. Thanks for watching.